let me just unleash all of my ideas and pent-up frustrations. But by the way, Furious 7 is 80%.
Drugs are better, drugs are better with friends are better, friends are better with drugs are better, drugs are better with friends are better, friends are better with drugs are better, drugs are better with friends are better, friends are better.
Welcome to the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books. I'm here with Tom Roberge, formerly of Albertine.
Formerly of Albertine, formerly of New Directions, currently of nowhere, but we'll get to that later.
You have to listen to the full podcast to find out where Tom is. Where in the world is Tom Roberge? It should be the name of this podcast.
Currently in Providence, Rhode Island, but the why is the revealing bit of information.
Exactly. So I know the secret, but everyone else, you can wait until we get to the end. So it's been a long time. Since
at least 6 weeks, I want to say maybe almost 2 months.
I think it was closer to 2 months because I went to Marfa on May 15th, and I don't remember when we recorded before that.
You've been gone that long.
Yep, I was gone from May 15th until June 22nd, okay. And then I've been here trying to catch up ever since. So if you are one of the millions of people who sent me an email during that time in which I did not reply to any emails. I will hopefully eventually get to it. If it's super pressing, just email me again. It's too hard. I've got too many other things going on. But Marfa is cool. I liked Marfa.
That was your first time there?
My first time there. I had a really good experience in Marfa.
It's a great little city, that's for sure.
I dug it. I ended up meeting a lot of like local people that are all, because you went there did you go there you went specifically for the art stuff, right?
No, I just went, just passed through. There was nothing going on. We just went a little trip.
Okay, cool. But yeah, it's the local people that live there are great. Like they're a lot of really nice people I met. The bookstore there is fantastic. Were you there when the new hotel was open?
No, just before.
Okay,
that.
So
they were still building it.
Yeah, so the new hotel is nice, and with the bookstores in there, and the events in the bookstore take place sometimes in the bar section of the hotel because it's one open space. So the bookstore is open like super late to like 11 o'clock at night because you can be in the bar and then just walk over and buy books. But that's great. Tim Johnson deserves a special shout out for running that. And like I just really liked it. I like the quaintness of it. I like the fact that it was. I also mostly, to be honest, the thing I appreciate the most was having 5 weeks to sit in a house and work on what I wanted to work on without having to deal with anything else. Being alone with your own self and your own stuff is very beneficial.
I agree. Having spent some time, I did a week. I did it in the middle of winter this year, and it's really nice. And I think I'm like you. Like I can do it for 8 hours a day, and then I want to get out and walk around or something. And Marfa's perfect for that because there are 4 or 5 bars you can walk to, but they're all really low key, and you just walk in, have a couple beers, and can head home, and you feel like you've gotten out, but also done, a lot of very personal stuff that day.
Also, most beers are $3.
This is true. Shiner and Lone Star are very cheap in that part of
Texas. And
Texas.
Big Bend, the Big Bend Brewing Company stuff is cheap, and I love that too. I really like Planet Marfa. Lost Source is probably my favorite, but I also really dug Planet Marfa when it was open on the weekends because it was outdoors.
Right. Oh yeah, you were there. I was there in the winter, so it wasn't. It was sunny, but it actually did snow when I was there, which was bizarre.
That's crazy. It hailed when I was there a lot.
Did you see any aliens?
I didn't see even the Marfa lights at all. I went twice to look, and I didn't. Neither time I caught them. I got to see a lot of like star stuff. Like I multiple times ended up at like not the McDonald Observatory, but at people doing stuff with large telescopes to be able to see like planets and the Milky Way and all kinds of crazy stuff. Because it's the amount of stars that you can see in Rochester feels impressive, or when you go out into the woods near Rochester feels impressive, and then you go to Marfa or that part of the country and it's like, nope, you're not even like, you're seeing nothing here. Like it's incredible.
There's no light. I mean, Marfa is a city of what? How many people live there? 5,000
2,000
maybe. 2,000.
But it's one of the,
and there's literally nothing for 300 miles in every direction.
right.
So
It's one of the designated dark sky areas because of the observatory too. So you can't have streetlights and you can't have things that would pollute the sky because the second largest observatory in the U.S. is right there. So it's like intentional to some degree as well. So it's unbelievable. But that was cool. So no, I didn't see any aliens. I did go to the Judd thing, the Chinati Foundation, which was interesting enough, I suppose. And I did go to the Cibolo Creek Ranch where Scalia died.
Oh, I remember you texting me pictures of that. I couldn't quite. I was like, that wasn't in Marfa.
It's like half an hour outside.
Was that like a field trip?
Yeah, I went and I paid a significant amount of money to stay overnight there because I thought it would be an interesting experience. And so I did, and it was wonderful. It's a 30,000-acre ranch with like a tiny little area that you can stay in that's based on this old fort that had been there in the 1800s that I don't know if it like collapsed under disrepair and then they fixed it all up. So you can stay there. It's for what it is, it's fairly reasonable because I don't think the guy is making money off of it at all. But like Scalia would go there and you can hunt, you can do like anything. There's a gun room. It's like being at like a camp with no oversight.
Did you go hunting?
No, I don't hunt, and I didn't want to do that because you had to pay to like get a gun. So I went mountain biking and went for a long hike to the top of one of the mountains. And hung out in the pool and ate all their food and booze and met movie people there. Which was pretty interesting. They had stories about like Iron Man 2 and shit.
Oh wait, can we talk about your movie experience or not yet?
I don't know what I can say about it because I'm still under an NDA until it premieres. But I can say that I was an extra in I Love Dick, the pilot of I Love Dick that will be on Amazon supposedly on August 19th. And when that airs, we will do a podcast afterwards, and I will tell you all the stories I want to tell about the setup of it. The one thing I probably shouldn't say, but will say, is that I have my suspicions about whether this is going to be good or not. But it's being made by Jill Soloway, who did Transparent, and it's written by Krause. The book is amazing. The setup for the series, at least for the pilot episode, is much more of like a setup episode that's supposed to be funny and local. It's all based in Marfa, and no one knows because you won't know until if it gets greenlit. And if it gets greenlit, then we'll find out. But if the idea is to evolve her character over the course of the rest of the season, so that it becomes more critical, like the character in the book, like the Chris in the book, then the first episode, none of that appears to be existent. But I don't know because I have not read the script. I only know people who did read the script.
So my understanding is that, and this is, I don't think comes from you, but basically that what was filmed for this pilot is just establishing them meeting.
It's the first,
right?
Yeah. Okay, so it's the first, yeah, yes, more or less. That's the sequence that I was in, and that's probably it's a half-hour pilot, and I suspect that's probably like 10 minutes of it.
Okay. So there you go. And which, I mean, obviously that's not how it happened in the book exactly, but, they got to do it somehow. This is an adaptation and not, a literal thing. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm curious, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know how they would do it like on as it is of the novel. I think it would be really complicated because has that distance and like the reflection of writing all the letters.
Right.
And that's
right. I mean, they're just lying in bed writing letters. That doesn't really make for good television.
But I do know about the second sequence of that takes place in the hotel. I know a bit of that involves a dream part that could be really crazy. And I know that one of the people that was in that part. But I'll wait. I can't say anything else. I'm not supposed to talk about any details of what was in what happened or anything. So hopefully this has not violated any of those terms. There's in a pilot. There's an extra. It was fun. I hopefully will be on air in some way, mostly my bald spot because I'm when I back to the camera most of the time, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
So
so the world of literature.
Yeah.
Our what this podcast is nominally about. So what happened in the last 2 months?
We have a list of things here.
Things that sort of relate to the translation sort of realm of things. We tried to piece this backwards together. We have a few stories, I think chronologically accurate. First being that sort of out of nowhere, I didn't know this was coming. Did you know?
Nope.
Which good on them, I suppose, for I guess in this modern age of leaks and endless advanced hype machinations, that LitHub just one day dropped a review site, sister site, or whatever you want to call it,
aggregator site. Another
onto their website called Bookmarks.
Which is stupid. The one thing, like when you say about the leaks, the era of leaks and all that, those leaks and interests and spoilers and all that relate to things that are not book-related literary sites.
Well, that's not entirely true. I mean, the Harry Potter stuff.
Well, I mean, that's beyond a book. That's much more than that. That's a cultural phenomenon.
And this, the Gates Elise thing and all of that. So
yeah, things that are more noteworthy.
Things that fetch money. Yeah,
not just a free website.
A free website that just aggregates book reviews.
So yes, so the setup for this, which just in case anyone doesn't know, so Bookmarks, poorly named thing at LitHub, what it does is it goes through any review that has appeared for a book and assigns a grade to the book based on what is contained in that review. On an A to E scale, I assume E, although none of the books seem to have anything related to that.
Wouldn't it be F? A to F?
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. A to F. Do we skip E?
Yeah, there's no E grade.
No, yeah. I've never gotten that low.
Aren't you a teacher? Shouldn't you know these things?
Yeah, if I give anyone an F, that would be the worst. That would be not good. That would be a failure on my part, I think. But it will, what it does is if you click on any of the books, I clicked on Underground Airlines, it says the reviewers give it an A, and it has quotes from the different reviews, but doesn't tell you why they've been assigned an A. But someone at LitHub has determined that this book has received an A via this place or this outlet. I have a lot of things that I don't like about this concept and this website, but I don't want to rant the whole time, so I'm going to let you give your.
I will say this. So I clicked on the same title you did, which Underground Airlines, Ben Winters, published by Mulholland. I don't really know what this book is.
I do, actually, and I've read his other books. I listen to audiobooks of his other books.
It seems to be like an alternate history dystopia sort of thing about slavery and airlines.
I don't know about the airline part, but yeah, slavery continues. There's never a civil war.
Got it. Anyway, so it says so we went from the main page of Bookmarks, which is still part of LitHub. And it says hottest books of the season. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All of which, so if you mouse over, you get DeLillo's 0K is a B+, Underground Airlines is an A, Gates Elise's book is a C-, Sect Object has a B+, Mandibles has a B+, and something else that I can't read.
Yeah, why doesn't it scroll over? I can't get to those either.
Weird. My screen is just not big enough, apparently.
Yeah, mine neither.
All right, so, we've got a bunch, they're hot books, and they've all got good grades. And then you go in and it says Underground Airlines, A, average A, and then it says based on 10 reviews. And if you go into that 10 reviews, what you get is a page that says what the reviewers say, and you get, I don't know, what are these, 100-word?
At most,
75-word blurbs with, they're structured as paragraphs with ellipses in there, meaning that things were elided, but they're meant to read as a continuous sort of long blurb from the 10 various reviews. And you get John Michaud from the Washington Post, Jennifer Forbes from the Christian Science Monitor, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes all the way down. Newsday, NPR, Financial Times, San Francisco Chronicle, USA Today, et cetera.
And then my favorite one, the one that you left off, the last one.
What? Lit Reactor?
Lit Reactor.
I don't even know what that is.
Because no one does.
Well, I also don't know what Tor is.
Isn't Tor just the fiction web or the publisher? Sci-fi publisher?
So the sci-fi publisher has a review arm?
It is Tor.com, science fiction, fantasy, the universe, and related subjects. I don't know that. I think that this is a website that might be sponsored by. Yeah, they have the publishing, and then they also have the website.
Interesting.
Yep. And they didn't publish this book, so no. I don't know. I don't know who owns Tor, but I thought it was Penguin.
No, it's Macmillan.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I could be wrong on that, but when I worked at a bookstore that was not the French bookstore,
It is Macmillan.
It
It is Macmillan.
Anyway, so you get aggregates of these things. What's missing here is what they assessed. They, meaning the people behind Bookmarks, who are the people behind LitHub, how they assessed John Michaud's review in the Washington Post. Did this get an A, an A minus, an A plus? That is unknown. We don't see that. We just get the aggregate, the final result, which if something has, let's say, a B plus, you would have to assume that some people gave it an A and some people gave it a C, right? Like, how do you end up with a B plus? And mind you, this is only 6 reviews. I'm looking at a subject, Sex Object by Jessica Valenti here. And are they weighted? Like, does a good review in The Guardian mean more than, a bad review in the Chicago Review of Books? Which I understand that it's, their right to sort of subjectively step in and say, we've looked through all of these. This is what we think critical opinion of this book has been so far. What I don't necessarily agree with, and this is where I think we agree, like, one, I don't think this is necessary, just as a literary person, as somebody concerned with how books sell in the world and how they're recommended to people, this was not necessary in any way, shape, or form. It's just an aggregator. This is like this may not be a perfect metaphor, but this is kind of like BABIP. Do you know what that is? Batting average of balls in play.
Right? Yeah.
It's a great statistic if you're a really nerdy baseball, a fan or executive looking, to give Daniel Murphy a new contract. I don't know why I'm bringing in Daniel Murphy, but
because it probably hurts in your soul.
Yeah,
still.
And how to assess, real value or whatever. It's just like one more level of sort of aggregating that I just don't think is necessary for your average reader. And that's kind of what Literary Hub pitches themselves as, right? Well,
they are the Literary Hub.
They want to be the place for readers to get recommendations and find things and sort of share in literary culture in a way that isn't just insidery, which it is exactly that. I mean, the only people I know who read LitHub are people who are critics, publishing people, booksellers.
I don't even know that many.
I don't even know that many booksellers read it. But I guess LitHub did go to Winter Institute and made a whole hell of a lot of noise and whatever. I think a certain kind of bookseller is aware of it. Your average reader, your average customer at your average bookstore, and by average I mean like people who shop at Green Apple, who have jobs that have nothing to do with publishing, who happen to read, let's say 2 or 3 books a month, and buy them at a bookstore because they like going there, or they live around the corner, and it's on the way to the farmers market in San Francisco. They're never going to read this website.
Nope.
And if they do, it's going to be some random story, right? There's going to be a story about, I don't know, some particular writer's take on some particular news thing, right? Like, I'm sure there's the link on here to George Saunders' essay about going to Trump rallies, right? There's probably that sort of link somewhere on the LitHub. Maybe somebody...
You act as if I read this website.
Right. So my point being that I don't think this is reaching average readers who would benefit from this kind of aggregating sort of thing. No one is going to... I mean, they keep saying that it's like Rotten Tomatoes, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Which, I mean, I don't know about in your household with, how it is when you're deciding what movies to watch. But in mine, Rotten Tomatoes is certainly cited if we're debating between 2 particular movies on one given night. It's like, oh, Rotten Tomatoes,
Okay.
right? You know,
Yeah.
Look, I know that like Fast 7 probably scored ungodly low on the Rotten Tomatoes scale, and those things are given a pass. But you know, for sort of in between things where you're looking
Right.
for a movie to watch, you do go and look up, you reference Rotten Tomatoes. That is never going to happen here with this thing. I do not see how that happens.
Not in the least. I have a lot of issues with this. It happened that there was a section of the book that I was writing in Marfa that pertained to almost this exact thing when this was released. So let me just unleash all of my ideas and pent up frustrations. But by the way, Furious 7 is 80%.
Well then,
there you go.
A different movie.
That's pretty solid. It's higher than Ghostbusters. But there's a lot of things like the way that the places that they're pulling from for this are a mixture of the obvious and the weird, like lit reactor, but not anything that's genre related, not anything that has this that sort of specificity to it. So they're not reaching a lot of different reviews. They're just going to the mainstream reviews that are all going to review DeLillo's book, that are all going to review these books. It would be hard not to already be aware of these books. Now, the hottest books of the season, why is The Voyeur's Motel even on there? It's a C-. So hottest is something they've predetermined, and they even say this on their page, that it's books that are like receiving critical buzz or whatever, that they've decided will be the hot books of the season that they're going to put in here and then aggregate their reviews over time for 120 days, which is fucking retarded because it doesn't allow for the critics to have any influence on what is hot. LitHub has already decided which is hot, which is dumb too. I don't think that the aggregate thing matters at all. It's just another way in which LitHub tries to gather clicks by taking the work of others and piggybacking and putting it all together onto their site and trying to implement themselves and work themselves into that situation for clicks.
Well, that's a pretty accurate summation of exactly what LitHub does. I mean, they are built on the work of other people, by and large. And this comes via all these partners. I mean, you are one. Most publishers.
Yep, we're giving them an excerpt from the Sacamano book.
Right, and so a lot of the content, the original content on the website, comes via these partnerships, and whether that's booksellers, publishers, I don't know, what other model magazines? Are there lit magazines that matter?
I think so, probably.
Who are giving content in exchange for, what are you getting out of this?
Supposedly promotion to readers.
And
I think we're supposed to get an ad, although we've never had that. And you can give away books.
That costs you money.
Although we get their contact info, which we are allowed to add to our mailing list.
Well, that's
of anyone who enters.
That's not that bad.
Nope.
But I mean, this is just not to get all big publisher, small publisher class warfare here again, but the vast majority of the books that are promoted heavily on the site that get repeat sort of promotion tend to be the large publishers. And that's not to say that like Valeria's book from Coffeehouse Press didn't get a lot of attention and, looked at from several different angles over the course of, the year or so that it was, sort of buzzed about. And that's a great thing. But by and large, it does tend to be these big publishers. And it's LitHub, I mean, like Amazon, like Barnes & Noble, just giving more and more space to the bigger publishers, because I'm sure the bigger publishers lean on them and say, but we're giving you more money. We're giving you more support in this non-money-making venture.
Yeah, and even if it's like we're giving you our author to give you the clickbait, to provide the clickbait, because like you're frequently asked to get your authors or whomever to contribute articles for free to the site as well. They have some people who are paid to write for it, I believe, but I don't know that number is super high. I also think that this thing it's incredibly narrow. So like any book that's like outside any genre book, like say you want mystery or this bookmark, say you want to use bookmarks seriously as a reader and you want to read thrillers, that's not really an option on here. They're not getting that kind of information. What they're getting is the most mundane, middle of the plate, sort of reviews. Not so our book, the Marguerite Duras book, has gotten a ton of reviews. The Bon Sabana David that came out, it is not included on here.
I'm looking through, and I don't see anything that isn't a fairly major press.
I don't either. That's why I was just looking through too, and I couldn't find anything. So I did a couple searches, and the Louis Ellie book is on here, but I can't think of anyone else to even look for. That would be on here, and I don't know when they started. I think they just started adding books as of like May, so that's not a huge. I don't know why the Louis Ellie book would be on there then, because that came out way before that. But so I don't understand. I think it's silly. I don't think it's necessary at all. So let's go to Mystery and Crime just to see and prove my point. They have a few books on here, but they're they have Target in the Night. That's a Deep Vellum book. Got an A.
I've seen one New Directions book.
Which one's that?
It was the one by Rivka Galchen, Little Labor.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like these things that are like these sort of aggregating sites that are supposed to do that, and I don't think that this is necessary. It's just another shorthand way of like, well, you don't have to read the review. We're just going to put a letter grade on it.
Right.
And like, why do we need to know about the new Stephen King book? Like, who out there is like, I wonder what to read. Who's this Stephen King character? Got an A-. How about that's wonderful? Right. And also, they just ripped off Michael Orthoper and his grading system. But his is like, has much more background to it.
His has more background, and he's actually providing a service that introduces books to people that they've never heard of, right? I mean, he does nothing but translated stuff, and at that, he often does, obscure translated stuff. So,
and he does some stuff that's untranslated, but not a lot. But also when he does it, so let me see if What's New will have one of these, but they have he has every other review and what grade he's assigned.
Yes, he does include,
or if he hasn't.
The work is shown, as you would say in a math class, right?
Yeah. The lack of transparency on LitHub is I don't know, not surprising, I suppose, but like remarkable.
Right. I'm reading. I've now switched to our friend Alex Shephard, or my friend. I don't know if you know Alex.
Alex, I have, and if Alex might well be listening to this, I don't know if we've ever met in person. We've emailed, we've talked on the phone a number of times. I really like him. I like the stuff that he writes for the New Republic. And we were supposed to meet around the time that I was in New York for our sales conference, and he stood me up. Which was fine. I was not in the mood for a meeting, so I just drank a couple beers and went home. But I never brought it up with him.
Please don't hold it against him. He's a good guy.
I don't. I think he's cool.
Anyway, so he wrote an article about LitHub's introduction of bookmarks not long after it went up, with the title, Does Literary Criticism Have a Great Inflation Problem? LitHub's new rating site exposes the flaw in the wider culture, which this was one of the very first things that you and I, texting furiously when this debuted, everything has an A and there's nothing below a B. Like, I could not find a C when it first went up. So he talks about all of this, and then he eventually speaks to Johnny Diamond, who is, I always forget Johnny's specific. Is he editor?
That's what I think. I think he's like editor-in-chief.
Okay.
He is editor-in-chief.
So where am I? Okay. When asked why the site isn't transparent about grades, individual reviews are quoted, but readers can't see the grade awarded to the review. Diamond said it was because he hoped bookmarks would become a discoverability engine for criticism as well as books. We feel, this is quotes, we feel that by not displaying grades at a review level, we encourage readers to read the individual review, engage with the complexity and nuance of the reviewer's take. Which I have so many problems with the that feels like such willful deception. One, I feel like it's very clearly like trying to make it up to the critics for just basically taking their blurbs and putting them on their website for free. God, it's so phony. And I feel like it's phony because it's just not going to happen. Yeah. Right? I mean, He's also done they've also done the job of compacting 1,000-word review into 75 words.
Yep.
And that is the opposite of what actual criticism is, right?
We don't like discussion about books, really.
No.
I mean, we do. People might. I might. You might. Dustin Kurtz does. People do. But like as a culture, we've tended to like in all the new innovations, quote unquote, are basically like shifting the way that we talk about books in a way that's like making it that belittles it and makes it more quickly digestible and not nuanced at all. And this is part and parcel of that. Yes.
It is to go back a few, or maybe it was the last podcast, but
oh God,
when Jessica Crispin was talking about the problem with, criticism these days and how there are just cheerleaders and everything is positive and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, this is an extension of that. And, Alex gets into it a little bit in this article. There's no reason for us to rehash that. But I do think that by only having books that get an A or a B, by not having, the D's or the F's of the literary world, by not giving the individual reviews by the critics the grade and showing your math, by not putting that in there, all you're doing is basically, it helps it skew towards an A, and it doesn't help anything become a discoverability engine if all you're doing is aggregating good reviews.
Yeah, and the way that they've self-selected which reviews they're going to be filtered into this is essentially assuring that they're all going to be B's and A's, because those places aren't places that are reviewing things harshly on a regular basis. Like NPR does like 6 reviews a month, 8 reviews a month that they're going to include. I don't know how many they're going to include, maybe more than that, but they're not generally like very critical sites.
NPR, certainly. I don't ever hear bad reviews on NPR.
No, we have an NPR review coming out, which I'm very, very much looking forward to.
Yeah, you're not going to get, like, for example, the New York Review of Books sort of Tim Parks takedown of The Vegetarian. That seems unlikely to make it in here.
Which is a good segue, isn't it? I like it. It works well. So that was one of the other things that happened over the time that we've been gone, is that Tim Parks wrote a longish article called Raw and Cooked for the New York Review blog daily about The Vegetarian, which won the Man Booker Prize, and sort of like went through. His initial question is basically, how can I judge a translation if I don't know the original language? He lays out like how he likes to approach it, which is similar to ways I try and talk to my class about this too. Where is that actual line? It's basically like so I must consider in a literary text, I must consider the relationship between content and style in the English translation. In a literary text, a certain content manifests itself in a certain style. There's no separating the two. The difficulty with translation is always to reconstruct that relationship. The danger is that one winds up with a voice that may be fluent, but that sits uneasily with the content. And using that sort of rubric, he goes through The Vegetarian and picks apart some things that he doesn't agree with and brings up some really interesting points that, like, I didn't pay that close of attention to the things that he's pointing out, but when he points them out, it's like, yeah, I can see that. I do get that. And then, but I thought the more interesting point in some ways is that he begins by putting forth that he read this book because it won the Man Booker International Prize, and it had 34 blurbs on it about how spectacular it is.
Hold on. Yeah, it's something ridiculous.
It's something, it's a lot. 34, and it quotes some of them as like a lot of them are in relationship to the translation. Yeah. First of all, it's gracefully written, it's elegant, it's assured, it's poetic, it's beguiling, understated, spellbinding, precise, spare, devastating, cool. And then Deborah Levy says, cool, still poetic, but matter-of-fact short sentences translated luminously by Deborah Smith, who's obviously a genius. And the ending sort of brought back to the fact that once all these things have been said, it's almost impossible to take a different tact on that book, because you've been sort of told how to approach it. It's been approved by these 34 people. I don't know that any of them read the Korean version or had that sort of basis that he's referring to. Whoa, shit. That's not supposed to happen. And I don't know if anyone could hear that, but that's apologize. That was my phone going off through my computer. But like once people have put that forth, it's hard to like assess something in a more objective way. And I think that that's an interesting point. And I think that that's an interesting way that he's gone in and found certain things that he would talk about, but that our culture tends to be very, very groupthink at times too.
I mean, yes and no. There's always detractors, and that's part and parcel of all this sort of stuff. I mean, by the time I read this book, I had heard so much about it. And to be fair, like, the people who were championing it were not necessarily people whose taste I knew I was going to agree with to begin with. But by the time I read it, I did definitely think it would be better. And I was completely underwhelmed with this book. And I mean, I didn't quite dig into it as much as I would have liked to at the time when we did our podcast. But yeah, I really did not enjoy reading this book, and certainly didn't think it deserved the award it won. What I do think, like, look, you and I have translators in our lives personally and work in that world and deal almost exclusively with translated books. And so I'm a little, I do not like that he digs into the like individual lines of translation ease sort of as much as he does. That said, he often makes solid points. The thing is, you could take any book as a whole and rip through them this way and find 10 examples that prove your point that it's a bad translation and 10 that prove that it was a really good translation. So it's a little bit of picking and choosing, which is fine. I do, about the tone, which he gets into, I think is very accurate and very fair to do. For those who haven't read the book, and, you know, we've already talked about it, but the narrator in the first section of the 3 is the woman who becomes a vegetarian, very normal, stoic, mildly ambitious, sort of button-down businessman whose tone is meant to be, you know, very flat and yet appalled by his wife's sudden change of personality and demeanor and all that sort of stuff. And yet hard to know. Either the author or the translator puts phrases into the English text in the book that we read that just seem out of place with that tone and with that personality. And Parks points that out, which I think is fair to point out. And it's either a fault of the author or a fault of the translator. And it's hard to know which, but, you know, it's a fault nonetheless. But what I think is most interesting to us as people concerned with how these books are received is the way that it was sort of put forth and the way this book has just been put out into the world and, you know, received and all of that sort of stuff and exoticized to a certain extent and all of that. I'm looking for the very juicy quote he has here at the end. Do you know where it is?
Don't. It's in the God, those last few paragraphs are long. I'm going to say, well, you look for that I liked this book a lot more than you did, and liked it a lot when I read it before anyone else had read it. Like, we read it the month that it came out in my class, and I enjoyed it, and I didn't think that it was a bad translation. I think Deborah is really amazing. I'm fine with her winning the prize because it helps her and helps her new press that she's starting up. I'm good with all of that. I think that at the same time, I can hold that opinion and say that I do appreciate Tim Parks getting into these nitpicky things because it shows that someone's actually engaging with the text on that level. And even if you don't always agree with them or you know that he's picking and choosing his points, it's great that someone is actually giving deep readings to things and close readings instead of just glossing over things.
Right, which we'll get to in a moment. Okay, I found the quote.
Okay.
So it's talking about the tone and the style and all of that, and you know, this is rather long, but I'm going to read the whole thing just so we're not taking it out of context. Looked at closely, the prose is far from an epitome of elegance, the drama itself neither understated nor beguiling. The translation frequently in trouble with register and idiom. Studying the 34 endorsements again and the praise after the book won the prize, it occurs to me there is a shared vision of what critics would like a work of, quote, global fiction to be, and that The Vegetarian has managed to present itself as a candidate that can be praised in those terms. Ideologically, it champions the individual woman against an oppressive society about which we know nothing except that it seems, quote, worse than our own. Emotionally, it allows us to feel intense sympathy for a helpless victim, which is always encouraging for our self-esteem. Aesthetically, it offers moments of surrealism, typically in the wife's heated and unhappy imaginings, or the brother-in-law's fantasies of vegetable couplings, which we can see as excitingly exotic and a guarantee of lively imagination. In this regard, the slightly disorienting effect of the translation can actually reinforce our belief that we are coming up against something new and different. But above all, the writing must be accessible. The foreignness and exoticism must in no way present a barrier to easy reading. Matter-of-fact short sentences, Deborah Levy said. Some element in the work that allows the word erotic to be dropped in can only be positive. Once it has been decided that the book fits the bill, all evidence of its unevenness and opportunism is set aside, and 34 authoritative quotations are placed as guardians front and back, defying the reader to disagree. And of course, if the novel is the real thing, then the translation must also be excellent, instead of just perhaps okay. Curiously, this barrage of praise and prizes begins to feel, for the independent reader, rather like the straitjacket of conformity that Hong Kong's unhappy heroine is determined to throw off in the first place. So, I mean, I know I take a rather contrarian view on a lot of these things with, things that are put forth as the greatest thing in the world. I tend to be the first one to be like, really? Like, let me have a look for myself and argue with you that it is not the greatest thing in the world. So he very elegantly says basically what I think about a lot of books that are chosen to be the it books. And this has nothing to do with translation specifically a lot of the time. But here he is talking about how foreignness and exoticism are, well, exoticized and romanticized and used to their advantage and played with and used as marketing, and that the quality underneath sort of gets lost in the process. Do you disagree?
Right. No. I agree with that. I think it's the quality and the way that one can react to it. And that's the part that I was trying to get at the beginning, is like that once they've got these guardians, his line is defying the reader to disagree with that. And it is one of those, it's one of those things where you feel like it's difficult. And the publishing industry has to do this. They have to try and sell books. They have to prop up their books. They want the praise for their books. But it does allow it for less of a discussion and more of like a continual, well, this is the greatest book. This is won these awards, so on and so forth. And I don't like those books either. And I tend to have even books that I liked when I read them, once they get to that point, I start to look back on them in a different way than I did when I initially read them. Because I don't like that. I don't feel comfortable with that sort of, this is the book, this is the great book, this is the best thing ever. I also think it's interesting that he does sort of imply, and probably accurately, that the vegetarian is like sort of the NPR of international literature. Like it fits checks all the boxes that you want the reader to feel, and that can be interpreted in that way, and does so in a way that's not incredibly offensive or challenging or complicated. It just does it, and it doesn't even have to do it particularly perfectly. It can do it in a modest, okay way, and people are going to jump on it because it hits all those right notes.
Right. Like, what's the name of the movie that won the best Oscar this year? About the recording of the Spotlight. Kind of similar. It's like, we've got gritty journalists. Check. Like.
Something that everyone agrees is bad, priests molesting children, check.
Right, exactly. And it goes down the list, and
those are books that people like. A lot of people like this book and respond to it for those reasons, and I don't necessarily find fault with them. If they want to read it and enjoy it, they can. But the unanimous vibe along those lines seems more problematic to me.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would reiterate what you're saying. Like, look, if this is your favorite book, like, God bless you. Like, I'm glad this is, the kind of thing that you like, and I can point you to other books that you will also like that are published by strange publishers and by, from foreign authors with names you might not be able to pronounce. That's great. More power to you for not reading, the crap published, for not reading Dave Eggers, for example. Like,
oh, man.
I never miss an opportunity to tear into Dave Eggers. Sorry.
Oh, that's great.
But, I think I was thinking of that because the total tangent here. Somebody had done like an algorithm of what the ideal recommendation for a hand sell bestseller. What ended up being The Circle by Dave Eggers. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, back to this. I agree. This is a great thing. I just, my problem is that I want to be here standing, raising my hand in the back of the room and saying, well, hey, what about Laszlo Krasznahorkai? Like, he won this award, and his books are really, really, really fucking good. And no one talks to him about this way. Oh, that's right. They're too hard. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yep.
And that's the problem. I feel like if more people just stood up and said, hey, this is going to be a little challenging, but nothing you can't handle, it will reward you in the end. Give it a shot. As opposed to like this bullshit about the matter-of-fact sentences, which is really unfair because I really like Deborah Levy.
Me too.
God, I wish she hadn't said that. So it's just...
You blurb things, you never know what's going to happen.
It's just one of these things. It's like, yes, there's a rising tide lifts all boats sort of thing. And I'm really glad that people are interested in the vegetarian, and the sales skyrocketed in the UK when she won, and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And, translators getting a little bit of notoriety is certainly not a bad thing for our community. I just wish it didn't have to come at the expense of also being good. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And Deborah should be noted, like, she has a long career ahead of her in which she will do a lot of amazing things, I think, and translate a lot of great books. This kind of goes back to the Tim Parks thing, too, of like being associated with a great book, making you a great translator sort of thing, which I don't necessarily want to bring that up, but it is one of his other parts of like his past arguments. But I think she's going to do a lot of amazing stuff and translate a lot of great books. So we actually have a book coming out from her later this fall, but she's super talented. And this, I think, is her first full-length book to get published. So some of the questions that he raises might also be like, how do you edit a translation? How do you work with a translator? When do you raise questions? What are you watching for before you publish a book? In which some of these things probably could have been fixed if the editor had been paying attention to tone and register, and some of the things, the ribboning thing, the what was the other one that from the beginning part? But
there was a mouth-watering thing.
Yeah, and there's the one of like shit, I can't find it. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I think what's interesting, and this is what I was going to ask you, is do you think that that we're sort of averse to debate and to discussing things to some degree? We like to praise the things that are accessible or more accessible or easier, instead of the Krasznahorkai, the vegetarian, which is slightly more accessible or more whatever. And then when someone does have a criticism of it, it seems like, and you have a lot of more information about this, but I feel like a lot of people jumped immediately on Tim Parks and were like, this is just mean and not okay. You shouldn't be critical of this sort of book. Like, we don't seem to embrace debate so much when it comes to book culture as we do of like, just go along, let everything be fine.
Right. So I'm not on Facebook, but my partner is, and she is a translator, Emma. She'll be listening to this, so thank you.
As you say it, too.
She's listening twice, basically. She's sitting in the other room. But she told me when this got published, when the Tim Parks piece went up online, that I don't know if she used this term, but I'm going to use this term. Translator Facebook went crazy. And so I had her show me, and I have some screen caps here. And I mean, as far as I know, I am free to read these, right? I mean, Facebook is public, no? I see people quoted on Gawker all the time. Not that that's the best standard to use, but
I don't know. They have a little Hulk Hogan problem over there,
but okay. So Alex Zucker,
I think it's fine.
I don't know who posted the original one, but basically somebody posted Tim's thing, and there's a long discussion here. And so Alex Zucker chimes in at one point and says, "Great discussion here. My biggest beef with Tim Parks is that he has a bully pulpit," which is true. "The only column about literary translation in the English-speaking world that I know of," which is not true, because Parul Siegel, is that how you say her last name? At New York Review of Books, New York Times Book Review has a column about translations now, and it's been up for a few months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it says, and he uses it mainly to say what he thinks is wrong. Luis, and I don't remember, Luis Rogers Lalaurie, I don't know who that is, made this point, but I would push it a little further based on his privileged position. For most of the things that get reviewed, from movies to music to visual art, even outside of culture, for vacuum cleaners and bicycles and oscillating fans, there is a range of reviewers out there, so we get a mix of positive and negative. There are lots of people reviewing fiction translations on a regular basis. We could just say, oh, well, that's Parks. But he's the only one. To me, that's what makes it so frustrating, and what gives him greater responsibility also to write reviews pointing out what translators, quote, got right. Only time I've seen him do this so far was when he praised Anne Milano Appel at the conclusion of his 3-part takedown of the Levy translators. Okay, he's not entirely right there. I mean, clearly there are 34 blurbs of people saying why this book was good. That's what he was arguing with in the first place.
Right. I mean, some of those are blurbs and some of those are UK reviews in which it's not necessarily one person with their column. But I don't, even if he is the only one, I don't mind that someone just does, then let them do their thing.
Right.
He's entertaining, react to it.
Right. And that's, I mean, I didn't screenshot all of those, but there was a lot of people following up saying, yes, ignore what Tim Parks does. We just need to do this ourselves. We need to be translating. We need to be reviewing these translators more and more, all that sort of stuff. But I do think there's an essential thing here, which is, who is this? Daniel Hahn. He says, couldn't agree more, Alex. We can't complain the reviews fob us off too easily or ignore us completely and then complain against the scrutiny because we think somehow we need criticism, but only when it's positive. I'm sorry Tim Parks chose this particular book, and I disagree very much with what he says, both about the quality of the book, translation itself, and the reason for its success among other critics. But if we're going to talk about translation seriously, then let's have these detailed conversations. And yes, he's got the New York Review book slot, but he's hardly the only translator who could have a platform in one outlet or another. If you think he's the only critic or writer about translation that anybody's reading, then yes, I'd worry about what some of the criticism is doing to people's image of the profession. But the more of us there are expressing what we think, the more room there is for healthy, divergent views. And I think that's part of the thing is that, you know, we as a culture and at large, and I'm not just talking about translations or books or anything, have, for whatever reason, tended to shy away from widespread criticism. There is far more positive review space in all, you know, review slots of cultural things, not vacuum cleaners, than negative than there was even 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's brought the level of discourse down. And so it does two things. It makes people overly sensitive to criticism. It doesn't progress the actual artwork itself in a way that's very helpful. And it deceives the public into thinking that, you know, negative reviews are better kept to yourselves or out of the public view, which I don't think is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway,
I completely agree with that.
There's a lot. Here's what I will say about Tim Parks, and apart from whether or not I agree with his take on this particular book or whatever, God bless him for at least getting these conversations going, right? I mean,
yeah.
The thing is, he says everything so specifically, precisely, accurately that it really gets you have to react, right? Like, this is part of what's, like, annoying to me about just the glowing, positive cheerleader sort of, this is the best book ever, full stop, move on to the next one. There's nothing to actually react to. Here, there's, like, meat to actually react to, right?
Yeah, and it's specific, and he's a good writer of criticism. Whether you agree with him or not, he does what he sets out to do. He frames those arguments. He goes at it without like hedging and without like trying to. I'm coming through your phone. And without like trying to like please people, he just goes to it, and I appreciate that, and I like reading his pieces because I find them entertaining, even if I don't always agree with what he says. I think that they're compelling.
Exactly. And we just need more of that. And, you know, I don't know. We all need thicker skin. And, you know, if you for the translators who think that they don't get enough attention and then complain when it's bad attention, it's like, well, this is the double-edged sword, you know? Limelight shows flaws just as much as it shows beauty, so there you go.
Absolutely. I kind of want to get one of the Tim Parks books and read more of his book stuff. Like, he has a book called Hell and Back, Reflections on Writers and Writing from Dante to Rushdie.
Okay.
Which might be interesting. It includes pieces on Vikram Seth, Salman Rushdie, W.J. Sebald, and Jose Saramago, blah, blah, blah. But then more along my lines, there's a season with Verona. A soccer fan follows his dream around Italy in search of dreams, national character, and goals.
Oh, God.
Fuck yeah. I would totally read this book. I want to see if our library has this, because I am going to get it. Anyways, we're running sort of long. We were going to talk about Barnes & Noble.
We're running long. We've earned it. We haven't done this in 2 months. And you know what? People need things to listen to on their iPods or phones.
So do you want to talk about Barnes & Noble?
So Barnes & Noble, when was this from? This is from mid-June. I guess they had like a quarterly meeting and sales were down, blah, blah, blah. There was speculation that they might close, which caused a whole bunch of mixed reactions. I think in the gut reaction to Barnes & Noble closing is always good riddance, but I frequently make this quote. When Borders closed, I was in Ann Arbor maybe 6 months after they had closed, and an employee at Nicola's, which I believe is now closed itself, or at least changed hands. I asked him, I was like, what are your thoughts about Borders closing? Has it impacted business, et cetera, et cetera? And he said, he's like, we wish they had stayed in business, because at the very least, it reminds people that books are bought in a bookstore. And that's kind of the way I've resigned myself to thinking about Barnes & Noble. I don't like the way they do business. I think they're not very good for small publishers. They're not very good for big publishers, quite honestly. They're generic. The employees are discouraged from having personalities. But I do encourage people to go to bookstores and pick up physical books in their hands and sort of browse. And that's not a horrible thing. And a lot of communities have proven that Barnes & Noble can coexist with the independents, as long as they're not, literally across the street from each other, which used to, do you remember like 10 years ago that used to be the thing?
Yeah.
It's like, Barnes & Noble's going to open up across the street. Did that ever happen anywhere?
I think it did in some locations. Maybe not a ton, but where it was possible, they did get rather close, because one of the things that they found is, like, a lot of times people only shop at the thing that's in their area where they're already going. So if people are already going to the independent bookstore, it made sense for Barnes & Noble to be close to it, not to put the independent bookstore out of business so much, but that's the place that people went to buy books, is that region. And putting it in a different place is like, oh, you have to build a new set of patterns, a new way of moving through that space. So it's advantageous for a business to be near a similar sort of business. Also, fucked all those independent bookstores. When I was at Schuler Books and Music way back when, they Barnes & Noble was just down the road from us, like a quarter mile.
Yeah, but outside of big cities, I guess. I mean, a lot of shopping does tend to be centralized, right, onto these main drag kind of thing, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So you're in one strip mall or the next, and makes sense. So anyway, there was speculation that Barnes & Noble might close. They are not closing, and in fact, they are intending to open. I'm going to read this here: 4 new prototype stores
in the weirdest places.
Okay, Eastchester. Do you know where this is? I assume it's Eastchester.
Not idea.
I assume it's like north of New York City.
That's what I was guessing, but I have no idea.
Eastchester, New York, in October. Additional concept stores whose footprint will be 20 to 25% smaller than a typical B&N, which is interesting, are set for Edina, Minnesota, which is just a suburb of Twin Cities. Folsom, California, which is a suburb of, Folsom Prison is there, suburb of Oakland and San Francisco, and Loudoun County in Virginia. I do not have any idea where that is.
I'm gonna look that. Yeah, Eastchester is near Yonkers.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. The centerpiece of the new stores, I'm still reading from this article in Publishers Weekly, which I'm going to go ahead and guess is just based on a press release that Barnes & Noble gave them directly, will be an expanded cafe, which company executives said they are extremely excited about. None of this is in quotes, oddly. Underlining the importance of the cafes just before the presentation to investors, Chief Operating to President of Development and, quote, Restaurant Group. The new cafes will be about twice the size of the current cafes and feature tableside service. A new expanded menu is being overseen by an executive chef that will feature, quote, American-style fare, as well as wine and beer.
I like American-style fare. That might be my favorite detail of this whole article.
American-style, which I assume means, like,
burgers.
American style. I don't really know what that means.
I don't think that's like.
Is that like a hamburger, but it's on focaccia? Like.
Oh Jesus! I don't know because yeah, the style part is confusing. It's a wonderful little detail.
It's a non-detail detail. The tableside service is very strange to me.
Super strange. When at Schuler, we had a huge cafe that I think what was it called, the Chapbook Cafe, maybe, that served food. I think that they did have. No, they didn't really have waitresses, but it was like a nice seated cafe, and they served wine. I think beer too. I don't remember clearly, but it was very popular because it was a place that people would come. Because the bookstore was a destination for like dates and for hanging out, and because we had a lot of events in there on the weekends, like music events, other things. A lot of people from the community would just go to the store on Fridays and Saturday nights, and that cafe would get completely full. I mean, it was a restaurant. It had like lunch menu, a dinner menu, dessert menu. It was like a restaurant, and it was really successful. I mean, it was the big reason that the store kept growing and opening new locations. But that was pretty cool, actually. I don't know about Barnes & Noble's American fare.
It all sounds very strange. I'm somehow remembering I don't remember where it was, but somebody from New York Magazine or something like that sent a reporter to go to Starbucks is now selling wine at certain.
I heard that from somewhere.
So they sent a reporter to Starbucks at like 6 p.m. to like get wine by herself. Like she was a, single woman out there trying to. And of course, what she discovered was that everyone was still treating it like a coffee shop where they had their laptops out, and it was bizarre. Like half the people there had no interest, had no idea that they even served wine. Like it just seems really strange to be doing that in a Barnes and Noble.
Although, given that the Barnes & Noble is the only bookstore in Rochester, aside from Greenwood Books, which is like mostly used or all used, and North Star Books, which I just found out about that is all used as well, and neither of which have any like seating space or anything. Like if I could go drink and read a book and people don't look at me funny, I'm tempted. To be honest, I'm tempted.
Yeah, that's
because at the bars in town, like that generally, well, and people are fine, but it sometimes can feel fairly uncomfortable.
Really? I mean, I guess, okay, for the last 15 years I was living in New York, and that's the most common thing in the world is to walk into a bar and see somebody reading by themselves.
I can't tell you the last time I saw anyone in a bar here reading by themselves.
Wow.
I don't think that I have seen that in probably 6 years.
Yeah, I had a good New York.
I don't think they read here.
No, that might be a separate issue.
Yeah, that might be the problem.
So do you feel like this is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic here for Barnes & Noble, or is it just me?
Probably. I mean, I think what they need to do is a lot of their business will probably succeed because it's still profitable, and it's just not as profitable as they want it to be. But also, I assume it's still profitable. Now I look at this website, their thing. It's always super confusing to figure out whether they. Oh no, they lost $24 million. So that's not so great. But like if they cut out their shitty Nook stuff and like had redirected all those terrible ideas and their research and development costs for that, if they just have bookstores with their Starbucks cafes or whatever, and just sold their books and their gifts and whatever, they're probably breaking even, and that's fine. But that's not going to be fine in this society. So eventually they're either going to make a lot of changes to try and get more money, get new investors, or just slowly fade away. There was a period of time, and I don't remember if this has already happened or if it's still about to happen. But because of when their massive growth took place, all the leases that they had signed were for a specific period of time, like say 20 years. And all of those are coming due at the same moment. And it seemed like a point where like they were either going to have to up and pay a lot more in their space costs or close a ton of stores. And I suspect that they'll have a smaller footprint at some point in the future, and that where those stores are located, they will be like the only game in town. Like I bet the Barnes & Noble here in Rochester is pulling a profit because it's the only game in town. But if there's one like 10 miles away, they could probably eliminate it.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they stay around and it just becomes like just a smaller thing. Like, I mean, this is probably a horrible example, but aren't they kind of like the Best Buy of the book industry, where like they exist, but you don't really know people who shop there. But they're kind of like stuck around in the areas that needed a place for that. Whatever you get at Best Buy, like a remote control when you lose your remote control, or a new TV, and they're just sort of there. And they had a competitor in Circuit City that went out of business, like Borders went out of business, and they didn't like make it gangbusters after that. They seemed to retrench and just exist where they could exist.
Yeah, and they don't put much effort into. Like everything, their entire business model, all of their energy is focused on streamlining, delivery of merchandise to the stores and getting it out there and just volume sales, right? That's exactly what Barnes and Nobles is, right? Like, yeah, I'm sure they have figured out these formulas for how many copies of the new Stephen King to buy, so that they minimize returns and make sure they can sell just the right amount. By where they display it in the store and all that sort of thing. So,
oh yeah, the displays, and they make money still off of the big presses paying thousands of dollars to have the books on the front, because it's not. I mean, it's not even. Yeah, it's like super high co-op too, but those are the books that sell. Like most of the books that sell in Barnes and Noble are those front counter books in the stacks.
Right. I will say further on in this article. One of the CEOs said the key differentiator for Barnes & Noble when it comes to discovery is its 28,000 booksellers whose recommendations, quote, cannot be replicated by any algorithm. Okay. The company will,
which is true if you're talking about independent booksellers.
Sure. It says the company will be empowering each of its stores to interact with the community. In fact, Amikuchi said B&N is going, quote, hyper-local in the current fiscal year and has a re-merchandising strategy set for 50 stores. I don't even know what that means. Where B&N will, quote, tailor the merchandise layout and assortment based on local customer demand.
So I think what it's saying is that they're going to, rather than when you have like Barnes & Noble as a centralized buyer and Cecily Hensley for contemporary fiction, and she can say like, I'm going to order 1,000 copies and they're split up among the stores in this way, that it's essentially, it would be like, well, this store, that book won't sell as well. We need to put this other book in the front. That's like, for whatever reason, has more local interest. Like you fragment the market instead of making yourself one big monolith.
Right.
Re-merchandise on those individual hyper-local levels. The way that we solve this, I mean, this is how independent booksellers have always figured things out, is that the individual at the store is empowered to order the books that are needed by the customers that they know.
Exactly. And
all you do is, it's like it's a decentralization of the buying and inventory process, solves a lot of these problems.
Yes, it does. It really does.
But like they think the core efficiency is in having one person with their specific set of data, of which they're probably, I would wonder what, I never hear, and I'm way into this shit, but I never hear about Barnes & Noble's data, like analysis or what they're tracking. It's Target and Amazon that are remarkably good at understanding customer buys and knowing which data to pay attention to and how it can influence their businesses. You never hear Barnes & Noble mentioned in that context.
No, never.
Which is weird now that I think about it. Like they have physical fucking places. They could gather so much data, and that it could actually impact how they do their buys. But I feel like it's Cecily looking at a few numbers and making an assumption.
Well, I mean, bookselling is there's a lot of gamble, like
Right, but she's making an assumption for Folsom County and for DC and for Miami and for Detroit.
right. And that's the problem.
Right?
And yes, those numbers get tweaked a little bit based on regions, but it's still region level. Like the store level sort of attention to detail has never been there. And maybe they're finally seeing the writing on the wall that needs to be there.
It would require a way weird structure.
It's just way too late. They should have been doing this years ago. I also wanted to point out that she says, going back to the same CEO, that the 8 to 12-year-old demographic, quote, cannot be undervalued. only Barnes & Noble would treat 8 to 12-year-olds as a demographic that cannot be undervalued and use exactly that language to say that.
Yep. Well, they can, and so can probably Pokemon Go,
right.
and and whatever. I bet you Apple would say something like
Probably.
that. At least my kids are right in that demographic. They're literally that demographic right there.
Well, you've got them all hooked on books. So that's okay.
They do. They read a shitload of books. Speaking of, so you want to tell us why you're in Providence?
Yes. I should add that my partner is now moved into the same room as me and is looking at me as I make this. But so yes, at the beginning of June, I guess the last week of May, I left Albertine Books and left New York City shortly thereafter. We have moved to Providence, Rhode Island, where in the next day or 2 or 3, we will sign a lease on a space here in Providence. And at some point, either in the fall or early next year, hopefully in the fall, if we can get into the space and if my construction skills are not too rusty and my 40-year-old bones can keep up with the pace, get into a space and open a bookstore and bar. Speaking of drinking and bookstores.
There you go.
Sometime later this year.
Awesome.
So
congratulations.
Thank you.
In advance.
Thank you. I will definitely invite you to the opening, even though you're several hours away.
I've never been to Providence.
Providence is great. I think you would actually like it. Although I will say, fair warning, the largest ethnic group here happens to be the Portuguese, so they have really annoying soccer fans.
So you had a lot of fun. They love themselves some CR7.
They were partying, like pregame drinking at we saw these two guys. We went to a flea market at 11 in the morning on Sunday, and I saw these two guys kicking a soccer ball around, carrying a boombox, and they seemed slightly drunk. And I was like, "What on earth are these two guys doing?" And then I realized they were speaking Portuguese, and I put 2 and 2 together. So.
That's awesome. The Portuguese part of Montreal is where I watched the Real Madrid Barcelona. It's not really a derby, but El Clasico a few years ago during a festival, and it was fantastic because they were everyone's so into it. I love it. I love that kind of stuff.
It means we get good Portuguese. There's a Portuguese butcher in their neighborhood in Fox Point, and it's really cheap and really good. Anyway, so yes.
Well, we've got some good Portuguese books coming out for you. That's super cool. You guys are living the dream, opening your store.
Yep, that's the idea. Bookstore. So yeah, it'll be half bookstore, half bar, sharing space. Anyone who knows me can kind of imagine what the bar might look like. Dark wood. We will not serve you a Long Island iced tea if you ask.
Are you? What's the name?
We're calling it Riff Raff.
Nice.
Mainly because I don't like bookstore bar pun names. We'll pick on each of them, but they're pretty awful. And we wanted a name that could be, a cool name for a bookstore or a bar. So
right.
Didn't want to tilt in favor of one or the other. So.
That's very cool. So if you get your lease signed, say right away, what is your projected opening?
If we can get in there, in theory, we're getting in the middle of August. if we can get in there mid-August, we should open in November. Need about 3 months to build the shelves, get all of the liquor license and the health department all lined up, and get some books on the shelves.
On the book side of things, is there any specific focus that you plan on having? Is it going to be like mostly stuff that you like the mysteries and that angle, or is it completely generalized, or do you have any
I think
sections you're leaving out?
There are definitely sections we'll probably leave out. We're going to have about 8,000 titles. It's in about a 1,500 square feet total space. So, give about 600 of that to the bar. 900 square feet is, a decent-sized bookstore, maybe a little smaller than community books or something like that.
Right.
So I think our focus will be just fiction. Literary fiction will be the main focus, obviously, considering my taste and Emma's taste. There will be, we hope, a very good, decent poetry section, which I'm going to leave Emma in charge of. And then I want to have a really good philosophy, sociology, sort of that section, political sort of contemporary events, things published by Verso and Semiotext, that sort of thing. And a little bit of progressive sort of history. And then a really good art, but contemporary art section. I don't need Degas monographs and things like that. Because we do have RISD is here, the Rhode Island School of Design, and Brown, two very liberal arts oriented universities with and then what am I leaving out here? Graphic novels, I think. Having worked at Albertine, my eyes got open to the possibilities of graphic novels. And of course, some sci-fi. Lovecraft is our patron saint here in Providence. I got to send you a picture of his tombstone. Cool. It just says, "I am Providence."
Wow. Yeah. That's wild.
And then, yes, some noir, my kind of noir sort of thriller type stuff. And then a small, well-curated, artsy sort of version of a kid's book section. Since neither Emma nor I know much about kids' books, but we are aware that we need to have some kids' books. I just don't feel the need to have every Dr. Seuss book,
No.
And there's a lot of really small publishers have cropped up in the last decade, doing really cool, beautiful, object kind of children's books. So we'll be scouring catalogs, those that exist, for those kind of children's books. I want to be able to put something in a parent's hands that's different, that they wouldn't find at Barnes & Noble, for example.
Right.
I will say Emma was heartbroken when she found out that that publishers don't actually print catalogs anymore, or that the vast majority do not print catalogs anymore.
We do.
You do. New Directions does. Most of the small ones do. Archipelago. But yeah, all the big ones.
Yeah, welcome to a life of using Edelweiss.
So much Edelweiss.
God, that site gives me a migraine just looking at it.
I cannot figure out how to do anything on it.
These people seem super proficient at it, that use it all the time, and I'm sure after you do it for a couple months, it's probably super easy. But man, it is an ugly, unfortunate.
Yeah, Sarah McNally
design.
She got on board really early with it, and if you sit with her and have a conversation about a book, and then say you're talking about 6 books in a row, she can jump around on that site and pull up all the numbers, and she has it totally figured out and clearly knows how to use it to her advantage. I just can't even imagine how much time, devoted to figuring out the nuances of that. But I'm going to be doing that, so I'll let you know how that progresses.
I'm sure it'll come pretty quickly, to be honest.
Well, I'm going to have to learn that and a new bookstore POS system, inventory system at the same time. Because I was Albertine used a French system. So I have not used an American one since I worked at McNally, which was, 8 years ago at this point. So be learning myself. Stephen Sparks, our dear friend, has offered to to give me the crash course in that software. So, what else? What else do you want to know about Riff Raff?
I don't know if anything else. I think it sounds like a pretty solid plan. It'll be great when it actually is open too for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably people wondering why Providence. Emma went to Brown, so she lived here. I grew up Connecticut, not that far. My mother and brother used to live not too far away in Rhode Island. So we were trying to think about, where would we want to open a bookstore bar? And we both, I don't know, we just stumbled on Providence and thought, oh, that's perfect. There's bookstores here. A couple of them are really pleasant places to go to, but they're not exactly what we're doing. There's one that's like 95% used, that's only open for like 4 or 5 hours a day. There's one downtown that's in a weird sort of neighborhood that's open, sort of normal hours, but again, new and used, and there's just not a whole lot of personality to it. There's one on Brown's campus or sort of east of Brown.
Yeah, it used to be really great.
The Brown bookstore itself resisted becoming a Barnes & Noble college, which is good, but it is. I mean, you walk in and the first thing you see is a brown mug or a brown sweatshirt.
I think, and I hope I'm not wrong about this, but Peter Sevenera, I think, used to be the buyer there.
We just heard about him.
He passed away, correct?
Oh, I was thinking we were talking about somebody. We just met Keith Arsenault. I don't know if you know who that is. He lives in Rhode Island again. He's from here. He just moved back.
Oh, right.
We had drinks with him a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about College Hill Books, and one of their buyers left and is now, we don't know, anywhere. So yeah, some of the bookstores have closed. There's just no one doing exactly what we want to do, and we just think there's a little niche for us to fit into, and the neighborhood we're going to be in is sort of up and coming.
Yeah, that's really cool.
There's a lively sort of bar and restaurant scene over there, so we can just sort of fit in and do our thing, and hopefully people welcome us and like what we're doing. We shall see. Nice. But so far it's been overwhelmingly enthusiastic response from everyone we've met here, and everyone in New York who I talked to before actually leaving New York, and the people we talked to as we were planning and all that sort of stuff. So,
also, I don't know that Peter is passed away.
Say that again?
I don't know that Peter passed away. Yeah. I need to throw that out there. I can't find that. It might be someone else I'm thinking of.
Who was at College Hill Books or not, but they're closed now anyway.
Yeah. And well, that's really cool. That's really exciting.
There's one bit of housekeeping we should probably mention. That the book club book we were going to read.
Oh yeah, that we were going to read, that we talked about, that we neither of us actually read.
I read like 20 pages and was bored out of my mind. I'm really sorry to say. I know people think it's a really good book. I just was not compelling me, and I'm in this weird mood where, like, if you're not compelling me, I just, my mind is so scattered right now trying to get this bookstore stuff sorted out that I need like really engaging, but sort of like I think we're going to go to a bookstore right now. I want to buy some like whatever Philip K. Dick I haven't read, something like that.
That's fine. Should we? We'll talk and we'll launch something with a new book for say September.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
For the end of September or something like that. So people who are into that, we'll get it going again, hopefully soon. Do you have any like rants or raves stuff, or is there any book that you have read that you've been into?
I will say, okay, yes. I was going to say I can't remember anything I've read, but I did read. So a friend of mine moved away from New York for Los Angeles. David, who you've met, now works for The Ringer, Bill Simmons' new thing with HBO. So he was moving cross country and got rid of a bunch of books and gave me a couple that he thought I might like. We have similar sort of taste in the noir sort of market. And he gave me this thing called Motel Life by Willy Vlautin, I think is how you say his last name. The book is not new. It's from like 2007. But he's the lead singer of some like alt country rock band that I'd never heard of. But and the blurbs on the book sort of describe it as like, the next generation, or the torch has been passed from Dennis Johnson. And I think they mean like Dennis Johnson from Jesus' Son, sort of version.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really good book. Like if you want something atmospheric about like Reno, Nevada, these two brothers sort of down on their luck, can't catch a break. Just a really, really good atmospheric, well-paced, like very straightforwardly emotional, gritty sort of book. I really liked it. You?
Oh, that's cool. Of books, I'm trying to think. I started reading our books for the spring summer 2017 because we're doing our pre-sales call like next Friday, and FYI consortium people, I will not have finished everything by then. But I did just finish the Jean-Marie Blas de Roblés book, which is we're calling Island of Point Nemo, which I really enjoyed. I like him. I don't think he's someone you would ever like, but I like his book, and I think this book is really funny and entertaining. I also, weirdly, I've been listening to the Patricia Highsmith Ripley books, which I had never listened to before, and those are entertaining.
I've never read those. I tried.
Really?
I read The Price of Salt and did not particularly love it. That's the one that got made into the movie from last year, whose name I'm blanking on.
The girl's name.
Carol, yes. That's the only Highsmith I've ever read.
It's entertaining. I mean, I don't think it's spectacular, but like it's fun enough, especially as an audiobook. I read Mark Binelli's new book, Screamin' J. Hawkins' All-Time Greatest Hits, while I was in Marfa, and that's great. Yeah. Mark's awesome, and that book's super fun.
Very curious about that. I want to get my hands on the Yuri Herrera.
I have that sitting right here, like literally on my.
Have you read it yet?
No, it's like it's just sitting right here next to, like, I'm looking at the cover. Okay. But no, I have it sitting here. I haven't taken it home yet. I think I'm going to read this though too at some point. I've got one of the next. So we have a Polish book that they're going to read next that we're doing in the spring. But the one after that is Rodrigo Frazan, who's an Argentine Spanish writer, good friends with Bolaño. Had a book Kensington Gardens that came out from FSG a number of years ago. Is frequently like includes a lot of like sci-fi Philip K. Dick elements in his books, and is very much of the David Foster Wallace Pynchon sort of maximalist encyclopedic sort of novel vein. And his first book, we're doing 3 of his books, and the first one, Invented Part, he added about 100 pages to the English edition. So this next book that I'm going to read is 850 printed pages long.
Jesus.
But I'm fucking psyched. Like, it's not only does it seem amazing, and the sections I've read are incredible and just mind-blowing, but it's one of those things I'm ready to like just sink into a very long, very fun, funny, crazy, interesting book of that vein. I'm excited for that.
Oh, I wanted to mention that I, while on vacation, tried reading the Javier Marías book, Thus Bad Begins, and I got about halfway through and put it down.
Wow.
Which, you know, I love Javier Marías. I was so bored.
Yep.
So bored.
What is it? What's the setup for this one? So it's
basically, it's narrated by a man who is older now, but is telling the story of when he was in his mid-20s, having just completed a graduate degree of some kind in like literature of some kind, gets a job, and this is like late 70s, I'm going to guess, gets a job working for a film producer, just being his sort of like his aide, basically. You know, he just keeps him organized and does translation stuff so the guy can communicate with potential investors, et cetera, et cetera. And he is asked to sort of keep tabs on one of this guy's friends because he had heard this rumor about this friend who had done something unforgivable. And then basically it's the young guy following people around, including the director, the film producer's wife. They can't get divorced. It's before divorce was legalized in Spain in the 80s. And so they're married but hate each other. And so he follows the wife, and then he, follows the friend. And I never even got to the reveal, like, of what the bad thing was. But there's so much discussion about what it might be that I don't know. I lost interest. I just felt like I was being strung along for the reveal and that it wasn't going to be that interesting. So, gave up on it.
That's one of those like a review of that book, which I think people would also say about some of his earlier books.
Which is fair. Which I don't know, for whatever reason, this one just didn't get me going in the same way. Yeah.
Oh man. There's something else I was going to say. Oh, I did also read 0K, and I did not like that.
Which, I mean, yes, I think I had told you when I read it the same thing.
Yeah. I thought I might as well just, I listened to it actually, and thought, well, I got to give it my own thing. And at first, for the first like maybe 50 pages, is basically like, well, it's not a great DeLillo book, but if it was from someone else, it might be okay. And then by like the halfway point, it's like, this is so boring.
Yeah, I mean that's
and these conversations are not unique, interesting, insightful. They feel very like grad school like. Like I just did not. I don't get it. I don't get why people really like it.
It felt like he was ripping himself off.
Yeah, a little bit of that.
Yeah,
just a little, just like uninspired. It was not. There's no joy to reading that book at all because it was just plotting.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
man. Yeah, okay. Well, that probably should do it for now. I don't have any other rants or rave type of stuff.
Nor do I. That was a long podcast. Hopefully, people stuck with it.
It's good. Hour 30 minutes. You got a good reveal at the end. You got the beginning commentary and analysis spot on. Well done, us. It's a solid podcast.
It was a solid podcast, and we should do it, fairly regularly.
Yeah, exactly.
See what else happens.
Now I'm back. I mean, we could do one more before I go back on vacation, which is a real vacation, which I'm going to read books that are not related to this stuff, and just for fun, finally.
I do have one of your books to read on my very small to read shelf. Josephine.
Oh, Klugart. I don't know that you'll like that. It's a beautiful book. Somewhat plotless. It doesn't seem like a you book, but Emma might like it more than you do.
Is that Josephine Klugart? I'm sorry, I'm having a conversation with Emma.
Yeah. That's a weird. I think it's amazing, and you might too. But I don't know, because I know the books that you sort of like. The one that we should actually, if we want to do the book club again for September, even we should do the Guillermo Sacamano book, the Fat Gessel Dome noir book.
Oh, I have that. I think it's sitting in a box somewhere.
He just got he's in this week's Publishers Weekly as a writer to watch, alongside books published by big presses, such as The Nix by Nathan Hill. That was one of the BA Buzz books for the year. He's right next to that guy. So Guillermo landing. We are the only small press that's in this, I believe.
That's good. Good for you.
Yeah, and I think it was mainly because they read the part of the book and were blown away. So I'm proud of that.
All right. Well, it's been fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will. I'm going to shut this off, and we'll talk to you next week.